So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session. Today we have Ina Mohenbeck. Did I pronounce it right? Okay. Ina Mohenbeck is a coaching and communication specialist. She studied at Dusseldorf University of Applied Sciences, and she studied at the IFAP Institute for Anglo-White Psychology. Am I right, Ina?
Absolutely right, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me tonight. Cool.
All right, so
shall we start right in? Is that okay?
Go ahead, start today's session. Yeah.
Fatima, I'm so sorry, I lost you for a second. Is that my connection or can everyone hear me quite well?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the feedback. All right. Fatima, did you give, was the introduction completed? Sorry, I just
Okay, so today's session is going to be about how to communicate with children affected by trauma. Is that the right? Yes?
Yeah, kind of like the emphasis I want to put, if that's okay for you guys, is more on understanding trauma at first, and then also have a look at what kind of effect trauma has on the ability to learn. And
Yes, we actually have a unit in our black belt program called When Trauma Goes to School for the pink belt.
I love that.
Yeah, so all the black belts have to pass that
amazing.
unit before they become a black belt. It's under the pink belt.
No, you're kidding. Actually, it's so good to hear that. And maybe you can even teach me a little bit here today.
So
but
I'm going to give them a little test. Let's do an icebreaker. Black belts, can you write down some of the things you learned in the pink belt? When you were doing the unit pink belt, what are the kind of things do you remember from the pink belt? Can you type it in the chat?
Oh yeah, let's use the chat.
What did you learn about when trauma goes to school? What do you know about when trauma goes to school? Can you type your answers in the chat, please?
That's a good idea. Is the pink one before the black one, or which one is?
No, we start off from white, then we go to yellow. You can do them in any order, but you know, it's similar to karate and martial arts.
Yeah,
you know, you go through different belts, and the final one, you become a sensei, a black belt. So we use that to motivate our teachers as they go through the belt to aim for the black belt. But you can do yellow, and then you can, after white and yellow, you can do red, you can do pink, you can do brown, gray. Gray comes before black once you've done the gray belt.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but today, do you remember what you learned doing your pink belts? Let's see what's in the chat. Oh, I haven't made you a co-host, so you can read. Okay. Where is that?
Still some people joining us. I'll just let them in. Oh, they're going for a few answers coming in. Perfect. Yes.
Okay, so I've got from Patrick to learn, and we can help them by showing to create a safe and supportive environment for children suffering from trauma, find a quiet and comfortable space where the child feels safe, minimize distractions, and ensure privacy to encourage open communication.
Yay. Yeah, I think that's one of the main essential parts, how to handle it and how to make them feel seen. That's a huge part. I love that actually that you have that in the education system already, because that's one big wish of mine, that it becomes kind of normal to learn about trauma and be trauma sensitive in education. It's perfect. So I'm very glad you guys already have
so Amina Abdulaziz says some learners go to school for love that they might lack from home. It's important to be empathetic. Good evening. What I remember is one must exercise a lot of care. It should also be reported to the relevant authorities. Safeguarding.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you can start. So you've got you know what we know.
Actually, it's so cool that you know already. So I would love to invite you guys. What I want to do today is give you a little bit of as I said, like having a closer look at trauma with you. Like, what is trauma? Sorry, I let people in here still joining us. Hello, everyone.
No, don't worry. I'll let people in, and Rizma can let people in as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What I would love for us to do is, like, I would love to give you an idea of what trauma is actually, and that's the first thing. So let's have a look at that, and also ask you some questions how you experience it in your daily business with children. And the second thing is that I would love to have a closer look to what kind of effect trauma has on learning capacity and on what it does to our nervous system, because that is so essential to learning ability and all attention that we can pay. So let's have a look at that. But I would also invite all of you to really jump in if you have something to add to what I have to say, because I feel like there's a lot of knowledge in the room, and we can absolutely use that to create a nice learning space for tonight. And after that, I would also love to hear some stories and experiences that you have when it comes to working with kids that might have trauma in some ways. I hear like some people have their microphones on.
Right, let me mute everyone, and then you can unmute yourself.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll mute all participants. So please, while the meeting is going on, you should be on mute.
I'm gonna share a little presentation with you guys, and I also prepared something that we can ask and answer questions together. So first of all, everyone can see my screen? Is that all right? Yeah, hopefully. Otherwise, please type in the chat so I can know if I can correct anything. So first of all, thank you for sharing this room with me, because I'm really excited to talk about this topic that's very important to me personally, but I think also very, very important globally and for everyone, because there's so much that we need to learn about trauma to have another look at, especially at kids and grown-ups or people growing up. So I already gave you an outlook on the agenda and what I would love to do today within the hour that we have. And just to give you a rough idea of who you're talking to here, or who is talking to you right now. So as Fatima already introduced, my name is Ina, and I'm originally from Germany, but I choose to live in beautiful South Africa, where I moved last year actually. And I made two of my passions like my profession. The first one is all about coaching, like systemic coaching, and I mainly work with people that have issues with relationship, with connection, people that grew up in drug abusive households, and trying to work with them. And the other side is communication, because communication for me is the glue between people, and good communication allows connection and belonging between people. And I think that's one of the essential things that creates our lives as humans and gives quality to it. So yeah, that's what I do. And what is my, like trauma is something that is very important to me personally, not only because I always, with the clients that I'm working with, I'm always facing trauma actually, without them knowing most of the time that they have some kind of trauma. And I did face trauma myself because I grew up in a household with an addictive mother, and from that, or coming from that, I really thought I would never be able to study when I was in school, just because I thought I might not be able to learn that much, because I had concentration issues. I wouldn't be able to, sit down and really focus on learning. And that was a really tough thing for me. And just within or after I studied, and actually it all went well, so I studied and everything, but just after that, I figured out why I had such a tough time learning, and that it wasn't about me being dumb or anything else, but that my whole nervous system was shook up from the experiences that I had. And let me ask you the first question, because I really want to know, since you do already know a lot of things about trauma, I would love to know if there's anything specific you would like me to talk about. And then we can see if we can make our way around this. And if you would like to participate, I would gladly ask you to participate. You can just go with your phone actually on menti.com, and I will open it up here and share the screen with you. Let me quickly change what you're seeing here, because I prepared menti.com, which is just a website for where we can share results. So, and I would like to ask you, is there anything specific that you would like to know about trauma? And now you can just go to menti.com and use this code and type in your responses, and they will be shown here. So I will do that myself just to show you how it appears here. If anyone has some, apart from avoiding things that trigger us. Yeah, thank you. How can one deal with trauma? Perfect. That's such a good question. Yeah. Thank you, Bookie. You can either use the chat or this menti.com. That's also fine. Whatever is more comfortable for you. And I'm just waiting a few seconds here, see if someone uses that. So again, the question is, would you like to learn anything specific tonight? How does one know that a child is suffering from trauma is another question. Yes, thank you for that. Perfect. Gonna answer that. Yeah, how can someone realize that he or she is undergoing trauma? Very good, yeah. Anything else that you would like to know? It's stages of trauma. Yeah, very good. What are the forms of trauma? Solutions, effects. All right. Thank you guys for your questions. That's very valuable. Just another second to see if there's something else coming up. How can one first help a traumatized parent as well? Very good question though, yeah. How can a teacher counsel a girl, child that have been molested sexually and basically couldn't share with anyone around her? Okay. Yeah. Just one thing to add from my side, since I'm talking about these things, like trauma and everything, but I'm not like to have a closer look at specific cases. It's good to have more information. So I hope that you guys understand if I don't give specific on like advice on specific cases. That wouldn't feel right to me because it's such a complex thing. So we can have a look. Maybe this question that just came in will be answered when we have a closer look onto the other questions. What is the right way to display empathy to a person who has been traumatized? Very good question. So good. Okay. And on menti.com, we have effects, how to see trauma, its causes, and is trauma depression? Good question. Solutions. Okay. So let me go back to the presentation because I think like a lot of questions that were arising here, we already can face here. So just to start and give you an idea on what trauma is, and actually when we look at trauma, we do look at different levels of it, like the psychological level of it, the biochemical level of it, like what's happening in the body, and also how does trauma, like how can we see it in the outside, right? That's such a good question, and it's a tough one, but we're gonna clarify that hopefully. Trauma, the word, comes from the Greek wound, like the Greek word wound, and that's actually how we also can see trauma as a wound. Psychologically. And what you might have heard before is that people, when they talk about trauma, like professionals, when they talk about trauma with a big T or a little t. And we're trying to distinguish big T trauma and little t trauma because they are, let's say one is more of a shock trauma, while the other one is more a thing of a developmental trauma. So where's the difference? The big T trauma is, for example, let's say the more obvious things. There can be environmental disasters. This can be accidents that happening. It can be like the very obvious things that overwhelm us. That is the big T trauma. So this is more of a shock trauma. And it's slightly different than the developmental trauma. And this is the kind of trauma we want to talk about today, because the developmental trauma isn't always the obvious one. So it can be also in kind of the little things, like more little things that are happening, like a parent's breakup, like even, I don't know, a pet dying could be kind of traumatic for a kid if it doesn't know what's happening. It can be an illness of a family member. So it can be so many things. And this is actually sometimes what makes it so hard to really see trauma when we just look at what people have suffered from. Because one event might be can be traumatic for a person, while the same event wouldn't be traumatic to another person. And why is that? That's because trauma essentially is like or what happens inside a person psychologically while experiencing the trauma is that a situation is so that a situation becomes so overwhelming for us. And we don't have, as humans, we don't have the resources, we don't have the capacity to deal with the situation. And the only thing that happens then is like it leaves us totally overwhelmed. And this state of overwhelming, of being out of control, of having fear and everything, is so overwhelming for our system that there are specific things happening. Like you probably have heard of the condition that can happen to actually either humans but also animals, is the flight, flight and freeze response. Sorry, fight, flight. Oh my goodness! Fight, freeze, and flight. This is the three responses that we have within us to react to situations that are overwhelming for us. And this is actually the three states that we enter when we experience the small t trauma. Okay, I'm just checking in. Is everybody understanding me well? Are there any questions so far? Please feel free to type into the chat, because I can always see the chat, because I can't see every little window, but I try to keep the chat here. There's another question: as we suspect someone to be undergoing trauma, how do we open it up? Yeah, that's a good question. Perfect. Thank you, Diana. Okay, let me continue with this first, because I think we can kind of clarify a lot of questions already here. So yeah, what trauma basically does is it's seen as this like very complex condition that goes that is created by a traumatic event. And what it does, like normally we're only reacting to a stressful situation with like a limited time response. Let's say there is something like a really stressful event. Maybe you're sick yourself, or someone in your family is sick. So that's a very, very can be a very hard to handle situation. But over time, we kind of can deal with it. So maybe we go through different stages of maybe it is fear, maybe it's sadness or anger or whatever it is, but then we can let go. That's the normal way of dealing with this kind of emotion. And now imagine with trauma, this part of letting go is not possible. So what happens actually is that the person experienced this situation is stuck in the situation emotionally. So when you imagine maybe that emotions are energy that's flowing through our body, which it kind of is, because everything is energy. So normally we allow our emotions to flow through our body, we experience them, and then we can let it go. So that's the normal process. Just imagine that trauma, the whole energy is just stuck in your body, and it can't go through you, and you can't let go off of it. So what happens in the consequence of that is that you might relive this kind of situations and the emotions coming with it over and over and over again. And like, just imagine for a child to go through life, or not only for a child, for everyone actually, but just imagine you go through life, and even situations that aren't harmful, you all of a sudden see through the trauma lens, and they become really harmful for you. Although they might not be on when you look at it from an outside perspective, but for you they are now, because you kind of see everything through this trauma or this event, because your body is still stuck in the situation. And with body, I also mean mind. I mean, the body-mind connection is probably something you're all very aware of. So that's a very real thing. So when something is happening to the body, of course, I also mean the mind and the brain. So yeah, I already said that trauma comes from the fact that we don't have resources to deal with this, and now we're stuck in this state that was so bad to us or that was so traumatic to us. And now it interferes not only with our feelings, but also with our ability to grow and to develop. I will give you a little bit more details on the consequences of that a little later. But what actually basically happens is that it shapes our whole life, because now we, as I said, we're going through life and have this view on life through the lens of trauma. And it's not only shaping the way we look at our life, but also the way we love people around us, and how we have an outlook on the world and on ourselves. Yeah, that's a point that is really, really important to me to get across to you. And I think you probably already know, but just to emphasize it, because often I get the question like, yeah, but what is trauma? Like, what are traumatic events? And as I said, the big T trauma events, they are very obvious. If I've taken away my house by a tsunami or something, that is very obvious ones. But the little T trauma is very not the obvious kind of trauma that we're facing. So it can literally be anyone. Be anything that's super overwhelming for our whole system. Just to have that in mind, because then I think having this perspective, we look at things a whole different way, because otherwise we only have the chance to look at our system and from there judge if a situation is traumatizing for someone or not. But we can't do that, because everything can be traumatizing to anyone due to the capability of dealing with situations. Yeah, coming to the effects of trauma. So I already mentioned that trauma has this psychobiological effect on the body, so that you recurrently have this feeling like you're stuck in the past and you can't really escape it. That's one big part. But the other big part, and I think that's the one that influences the learning situation the most, is that your body is in a constant chronic stress. So I think the best example for it is really if you have a look at kids that grow up in a very stressful environment, and I mean, that can be almost everything, right? Especially a lot of crime happening around you, or parents fighting even, that also can be very, very harming to kids, because kids have, of course, this natural willingness to stay in connection with parents, because they're ultimately dependent on the parents to give them care. So kids always want to stay in connection. And if the parents are fighting, that can be chronic stress. Like, so many factors can be chronic stresses for especially kids. And what that does, like this chronic stress to our nervous system, that's mostly responsible for the inability to pay attention for a longer time. So actually, I don't know about Africa and or African countries, how it is there, and I would be very interested to know. Actually, maybe afterwards you can tell me. But in Germany, there was a time when, and it was quite simultaneously with I think maybe 10 or 20 years ago, that there was a huge rise of cases of ADHD. A lot of kids were all of a sudden diagnosed with ADHD, I think more globally. But of course, I just I perceived it here in Germany quite strongly, that all of a sudden a lot of kids had this attention deficit order and a lot of problems to stay focused, and for that also a lot of problems to learn. And this is a very interesting thing, and I want to introduce you to a researcher, but also a physicist from Canada. His name is Dr. Gabe Mate, and he's researching, doing a lot of research on kids, but also grown-ups, so both, but especially on kids and what kind of effect chronic stress has on their ability to learn. And his theory is, or his hypothesis is that ADHD is actually just a consequence, like following up of chronic stress, and with that mostly of trauma. Because he says, like, ADHD is nothing that we are born with. It's a condition that we gain while living and while growing up. And he says most responsible is extreme chronic stress, which can be, is like for him the consequence of trauma. So this is something that was really interesting to me, because what we did with kids here was when they were diagnosed with ADHD, what we actually would do here is give them a lot of medication to calm down. But this medication had a lot of side effects. So kids were not only calming down, but they were really feeling out of this life. So they weren't able to participate socially as they did before. So that has a lot of, it had a lot of effects on their personalities even. And I think when you think about that trauma, that trauma can be the cause of this condition that's called ADHD, but that we can learn better and that we can actually find the root cause of this ADHD condition. So let's say the deficit that especially kids experience, then we can deal with it in a totally different way. And I think within this lies a big chance for schools, but also of course parents, if they understand this, to deal with it in a totally different way. One other big thing, or there are many consequences of trauma, and also the ones that I wrote down here, they are for me the biggest ones, but there are so many effects that trauma can have, and also how trauma can show up. But what I wanted to point out is that the core of experiencing trauma is also the disconnection from self. So in psychology, we do speak, or we do talk about that we have different parts of our personality that form us as a person. So of course I'm Ina, and I don't have several personalities, but within me there are different personalities, right? So it's me being Ina the coach, and I'm Ina the friend, and I'm also Ina the sister. This kind of parts within me, that's what I mean when I talk about that. And when we talk about disconnection from self, you can kind of imagine that kids, also grown-ups, but they kind of disconnect from the parts that have been traumatized the most. So let's say a child has been very vulnerable in this moment where the traumatized situation happened. The feelings that are connected to the part, like to the vulnerable part, will be kind of disconnected from self, because the pain sometimes is so hard to hold for a kid or for a grown-up, also for a human. The pain, the emotional pain that it holds, this part is so hard to hold that the easiest way for the system is to disconnect from it. But as you can imagine, like disconnecting from a part of our psyche and from a part of ourselves is really not the healthiest way to live. And but this is, and that's why I think it's one of the most important things to where the most healing lies in also, is to reconnect with the parts that I disconnected from just to protect myself when experiencing trauma. And what makes it even worse is that people experiencing trauma not only disconnect from themselves, but most of the time also disconnect from other people. And since we're social beings, I mean, you know how essential other people, loving connection, the sense of belonging is to us. I mean, it's one of the essential things for human beings. So disconnecting from ourselves and the consequence of that, also disconnect from other people, is one of the most, to me, dangerous factors or consequences that trauma brings. And mostly this disconnection from other people also happens because shame, shame and also guilt are the two emotions that play a huge role in trauma, because especially kids growing up, their brain, I think especially when they're at an age under 8, around like up to 7, they can't really differentiate if it's when a situation is happening, if it's their fault or a responsibility or not. So let's say let's take the example of parents splitting up. You will find a lot of kids that feel responsible for the split up of the parents and therefore carry a lot of shame and a lot of guilt with them. So these two emotions especially are very much connected to trauma. And shame, I mean, shame is known as one of the heaviest emotions to handle, and also one of the emotions that creates a lot of space, like disconnect to other people. That's why it's, so heavy, but on the other hand, so important to know that people having trauma, facing trauma, carrying mostly a lot of shame. And that's maybe also already one of the answers to the questions that have been in the chat, like how do I realize or recognize that there's trauma in someone. And when you realize that that child or a person is carrying a lot of shame with them, not all of the times, of course, but this might be an indicator for a traumatic event, especially when it's a traumatic event in a social, like in a social environment, like a growing up or facing trauma with another person, like relationship trauma. This is the spaces where especially shame plays a huge role. And with that, also a very shame-based view on the self is a consequence of that. Trauma also has a huge impact on brain development, actually. I don't want to go into this topic that deep with you because I'm not a physicist, and probably someone else can explain with a little bit more capability what really happens in the brain. But I just want you to know that it has this huge effect, that it really shapes our physical parts in the body. Okay, guys, so I've talked a lot until here. Please let me know if you have any questions. Is there anything to... Harry, fight, flight, freeze. Yes, that was what I wanted to say. Thank you for pointing it out or writing it out. Okay, cool. Thank you guys for the feedback that you're following. Perfect. And I know. Okay. Okay, let me know if there are any questions. Otherwise, I'm continuing with this because we want to have a little bit more time to the end to also sharing some experience. Okay, as I said, I'm not going to go within this consequences, like what trauma does to your body. I want to give you an overview, but as I said, I'm not going to give you an explanation in which brain area everything is happening. But I want you to know that trauma can have this significant impact on our ability to learn, on ability to form memories. Actually, studies found that people experiencing trauma have very often difficulties to memorize stuff. And what I think you can experience most in kids, and this is also the question to how can I detect if someone or a child is traumatized or not, is that mostly children are not capable to self-regulate their emotions anymore. I mean, regulating your emotions is something that you learn while growing up, so that makes it sometimes hard to detect it within children, because for children sometimes, right, it's normal, depending on how old they are, it's normal that they can't regulate their emotions by themselves. So that's why they need sometimes someone in the outside helping with this. But if you really can see maybe that a child has difficulty self-regulate and their emotions, that could be a hint for the trauma. Okay, no questions. All right. Thank you, guys. Sorry, I lost track, but I'm back on it. Okay, and apart from the regulating emotions, even thinking and reflecting or like concentrating is really, really hard for people facing trauma. And this is because also, like I gave you this picture of the stuck energy in the body, right? And if you think like it is really, really like your system, like your body and also the brain and your psyche, they do need a lot of effort to not letting this stuck emotion interfere with everything in the present. But this is actually what trauma does. So it really is kind of this hidden force that you can't see, but it drags you back in the past to this event, because your system, like your psyche and your body, they have this natural urge to be in at a certain state, like let's say at a state of peace, at a state of at a state of balance. But this stuck emotion is disturbing the balance. So what your subconscious does is actually always pointing back to this stuck emotion and to the trauma. But of course, that's super, like, while you're trying to tackle your day and your daily business and focusing on the here and now, it's really disturbing. So this whole process of having trauma and trying to deal with daily stuff is really energy consuming for the whole system. Ekwu, thank you for your question, just because it fits so well here, because you asked, how can a traumatized child be helped to memorize things? That's such a good question. And I think almost to all kind of questions, the answer will be that we help the kid with the root cause, which is the trauma. So dealing with the trauma would ultimately help with all the symptoms that the child has from having this trauma, obviously. But what can you do in the first attempt? I will actually the next or the slide afterwards is about that. So what can we do? But I want to say this. If you feel like a child is really aroused, like, and can't concentrate or has difficult to memorize, it's mostly because the system is too aroused. So in the first attempt to help him memorize stuff is regulating the nervous system and calm down. And how we calm down, I will tell you on the next slides, okay? Because it's a really interesting question. What can we do, right? We all want to know that, dealing with people that are traumatized. And it also is really, or that brings me to the next point, which is like, what kind of impact does trauma have on the nervous system? And this is actually, the nervous system is kind of the epicenter of that is affected by trauma. So especially the parasympathetic nervous system is the one that is affected by trauma. And this nervous system is responsible in our body for rest and relaxation. But if we experience, or when we experience trauma, it is kind of disturbed. So we can't really, or it's hard for us to rest and relax. But as we all know, we're humans and we need rest and relaxation, right? So this is kind of a really vicious cycle of, I want to calm down, but I can't. So I'm going into this restless state. And this is supporting the constant stress that's within the nervous system anyway, right? So there's no ability or no way out of this loop. And you're in this loop of constant stress. And because the trauma, or because there is trauma, and it causes that you can't self-regulate, you can't get out of this loop. So that even raises the question more, like, what can we do about it? I will tell you now. But yeah, what also is really interesting to know is, and I think a lot of children particularly deal with it, and it can be totally normal sometimes because kids deal with a lot of stuff, but really strong emotions like anxiety, anger, restlessness, and even panic. And as I said, also hyperactivity and the inability to focus can all result in this from this experience of trauma. And this this state of I'm always ready to react to a threat, because that's what the nervous system is thinking, right? It's always thinking like, okay, there can be a threat around the corner, because it's still stuck in this trauma situation where there was a threat, but it never came out of it. So this is where the brain is constantly cycling around, that there is a threat to come every second. Okay. Guys, I would love to know actually, how many % of the kids or grown, like, yeah, probably it's mostly kids that you're teaching, are affected by attention deficit? And again, you can go to Mentimeter. I prepared a little questionnaire there, so you can see it here. If you like, just go to menti.com and you can use this code, and then you can give your estimated percentage, just roughly. I just want to have an idea and also let the others see what you think. Oh, sorry. What you think, how much % of the kids are dealing with this kind of attention deficit. I also, or you can just type it into the chat. That's also fine. Okay, I'm checking your messages. Ekwu, would you be so kind to mute your microphone? That would be wonderful. Then everyone can hear more clearly. Okay, so we have 25%. Anyone else with some rough estimation? Well, 25 is quite a lot. That's probably mirroring a lot of experiences like that. Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. 10%, 25, 10, 50, 20. Wow. Yeah. 15. Okay. Wow. That's a lot. Yeah. 10%. What I've noticed is 30% are going through a lot. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Jesus, guys, you really have a really lovely job, but it's a tough one. Hey, you have to deal with a lot. Crazy. Because you're not only teachers here. Hey, 20 to 30% even. Yeah. Here we have 10. Yeah, that's roughly what I guessed, but it's really interesting to see like how many of you experience it to be quite close to 20 to 25%. That's quite a lot. So yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing. I'm going back to the presentation so we can actually, oops, sorry, I wanted to make it big, not small. So we can actually have a look at how do we deal with this now, right? Okay, before we jump into this section of self-help and self-regulating, any questions so far? Or shall we just continue and do questions afterwards? Yeah, okay. I don't see any. No, okay, then let's continue from here. Okay, so with all that we know now and that you already knew before, what can we do now? I mean, I want to put it in a frame because trauma is a really, like, let's say, severe thing in terms of it's not something that all of the things that I'm written down here just help when we have help to actually process the traumatic event. And what I mean by that is the best solution really is if a child or also a grown-up, let's say a human, would have someone like a therapist, a coach, someone who is trauma informed and knows what to do. If there would be someone like that guiding this process. Why is that so important? Trauma, as I said, what's happening inside of us, that it overwhelms our nervous system. Like, and as I said, like the stuck emotion that I was talking about, you can really imagine like this is a ball, and if this ball is going to explode, like if the person has to feel all of that, what's in there, that can be super overwhelming. And our system, like our brain, our psyche, is really smart, you know, it would do everything to prevent, to again, overwhelm your own system like this. So it will do everything, you know, to keep this energy ball away from exploding. And when we try, or let's say we would try to face this trauma and tackle it by ourselves, even for a grown-up, it would be so hard, because that means you need to go into this energy ball, let's say, that's stuck in there, and where there's a lot of maybe fear and also a sadness, maybe anger, all of these emotions, and you have to deal with them yourself. And this can be really overwhelming. So this is why it's so important to have someone in the outside that can hold space for you, that you can feel all of that, but you can also feel that you're safe now, that you're not in this past traumatic event anymore, but that you're in the here now, and that you're safe now. And within this safe space and environment, you can feel through and you can let go of the traumatic stress that's happening in your body. I'm just checking okay, sorry, just check the chat quickly, but there's nothing, saw movement. And this is why I would always recommend to have someone aside by your side if you decide for yourself. And this is like the tough part with kids, right? They can't decide for themselves, but we grown-ups, we can decide whether we want to have apart from other challenges like availability, money, all of that. I'm aware of this kind of challenges, but let's say theoretically, we can decide that we want to have someone who is accompanying us and helping us through to heal trauma. kids can't do that because they probably don't even know what they're facing. So it's really important that they have trauma-informed grown-ups around them, like you. And there are a few things that we can help kids and people like in general with, even also grown-ups. So the first one is physical activity. And you might notice that people or kids that are really challenged, they need physical activity. They are really active by themselves, right? Because this is because the nervous system tells them all the time that there's stress in the body, right? And then they want to get rid of the stress, and with this, like having this physical activity. So, and this is a good thing, you know, like create an outlet for the stress that's happening inside. It needs an outlet on the outside. So physical activity is a really healthy way to deal with this trauma energy that's stuck in the body. Another thing that's really simple, and you could also probably do that in class, is mindful breathing. And I love this this kind of thing because we all have our breath with us, right? It doesn't cost anything. You can learn very, very easy techniques actually. And maybe it's also a way just to start the class, you know. And I want to show you one breathing technique, which is the 4-4-4 technique. So it's really simple because you breathe in 4 seconds. So if you like, join in. I will breathe in 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathe out for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And doing that like repeatedly for a few times, you will realize that this mindful breathing, it will calm you down. And this is because breathing affects our nervous system, especially when we breathe, when we just imagine to breathe more deeply than like where our navel is, like within our belly, like really deep breathing is touching our nervous system, or one part of the nervous system that's sitting in the belly. And this part of the nervous system just gets the information like, hey, you can calm down. Everything is cool. You know, you just need, there's no danger around, there's no stress. And this is just by breathing. So breathing is a really, really helpful technique that everyone can do actually to calm down in the moment. I love that about it. But what I also saw, like a lot of, or not a lot, but there are more and more schools also introducing little yoga classes during the breaks, or as a start to their day, or little meditation phrases. You know, this is the perfect thing if your nervous system is shook up. Especially yoga is probably even the easier thing to do, because in yoga you have a little bit of movement, which is much easier for traumatized kids than sitting still and meditate, right? Because that's really hard for them to focus. So I would rather actually recommend to do some yoga elements, and it doesn't have to be complicated, you know. It's just even the downward facing dog already is something that helps the nervous system to calm down, and especially in the combination with breathing. Yeah. But if you really sense like, or feel like some you have a maybe you have a child that's stuck in a situation, in an emotional state, like let's say you have a child and you can feel that there's a lot of anxiety in the child. It can also come from trauma. It can also come from other, like, just experiences in the present, right? But wherever it comes from, it always helps this within this situation to engage our senses. That means if you're, as a teacher there, just help the child to use the senses and go through, like, what do you see around you? And then you let them name 5 things that they can see around them. what can you hear? Like maybe they can hear birds chirping, or maybe they can hear the wind and the leaves in the wind, you know, something. Let them focus on something that's maybe calming them down. Or you can ask them what they taste. Maybe they can even feel the grass on their or the whatever they're standing on the feet, below their feet, right? So all of our senses, also smell, just engage the senses to let the person come back to the here and now, and that always helps them, because what anxiety does is put you in a state where you can't really feel the here and now anymore. And coming back to the here and now is really easy over engaging the senses. And especially when someone is walking you through this, right? So name 5 things this, 5 things you smell, 5 things you can hear. So this is a really nice thing to do. Also within a meditation, maybe. Something that's obviously very helpful, but also very challenging for people facing trauma is the allowance, or give yourself the allowance to feel. Because as I said, one of the essence things of trauma is that we are not connected anymore to ourselves. So the ability to feel also sometimes is taken away with this. And reintegrating these parts that are neglected also gives us the ability or the allowance to feel again, which can be very difficult. And as I said, the best setting would be in a therapeutical setting or with a coach. Music can absolutely help to stimulate in a positive sense. So turn on your favorite music, and also it brings you back to the here and now. And then there are 2 more things that are really, really effective when it comes to trauma and the nervous system that's really shook up. I hope that's the correct version. Taking cold shower has an immediate effect on our nervous system. Maybe you know it from own experience, but cold water does something to your body, and also is very uplifting, because it releases a lot of endorphins in your body. So cold showers are very good, and it brings you also to the here and now. And actually singing or humming is also all right. So singing or humming is stimulating the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is one that's one of the big nerves that's coming from the brain down in the body, and it ends up here. So what sometimes what you could also do is, like, as I said, either singing or humming is stimulating this nerve, so that will calm you down immediately. Or what you can also do is just taking 2 fingers and just stimulate the vagus nerve. It's under your collarbone here, and just tapping in the vagus nerve for a bit, just for a minute, you know. And while doing that, just breathe in and out, like in your belly, and stimulate the vagus nerve just by tapping on it with 2 fingers. Mustn't be hard, it's just very soft. But by doing that, I activate this nerve, and it will immediately, excuse me, immediately tell the body that everything is okay. Okay. So these are the things that you can, sorry, I'm just going back 1 second. These are the things that you can, like, hands-on, like, directly do also with kids. But just to wrap it up, and what is very important in general to overcome trauma is safe relationships is the core important thing for especially kids to have. Especially kids, because they are so so dependent on their caregivers, and they need to know that they're safe with them. And caregivers can be anyone, right? Can be family, can be close friends, family, can be excuse me, but can also be teachers. Fatima, are we out of time, right?
Yes, we are.
I'm so sorry. I was a little bit too enthusiastic about the topic here. I'm just finishing that because you can see it's quite easy.
Yeah, but it's good. It's good. It's good. I don't mind. Yeah, you can just round up in the next 5-10 minutes.
No, it's fine. I just need, give me 2 minutes. So it's safe relationships, the sense of belonging to one person, like have one person that is, or for kids to have one person that is really close, and a safe space is important. Support and healing is what I said, like psychological help, or someone who is familiar with trauma, and a lot of self-care. So taking time for yourself, do what's good for you. That is definitely something that helps. And I have 2 books for you that are dealing with a topic from 2 experts in the field. That is Dr. Gabor-Mate, that I told you about, and also Peter Levine is a specialist in trauma. And those 2 books dealing with exactly this topic that are probably interesting for you. And yeah, then I'm just left with saying thank you for having me, and sorry that I took a little bit longer. It's just such an interesting topic, and I get carried away a bit. I just want to know, is there any question I haven't answered so far? Do you feel that your question is not answered yet? Then please also maybe just unmute and throw your question at me. Then we can go this way. I'm just stopping sharing my screen. And anyone whose question wasn't answered, I'm just scrolling through them. Thank you. You're welcome, guys. I hope you learned something, because you already knew so much, but I hope you learned something new. And again, thank you so much for having me, and bless you for the job that you're doing. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I'm really bowing my head.
Thank you so much, Ina. It was a really, really informative session. We've learned so much about the techniques, especially the techniques of dealing with trauma sizes and all the other things that we can do as well. So not only are the children stressed, sometimes the teachers are also stressed. So we need to do lots of things. So thank you so much. We really learned a lot. I think people were asking questions during the session, so we don't need to have a long Q&A at the end. It was interactive, wasn't it? Your session. Yeah.
I hope I answered every question.
Exactly. So I'll just have a look in the chat if there's anything else.
Yeah.
I think people are just appreciating and saying thank you. Is it Danke schön in German?
Gern geschehen.
Yeah, Danke schön. Thank you very much.
Guys.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thank
All
you,
right.
Ina. It was
There are no other questions.
you.
Thank you, Rizwa, for suggesting having me.
I'm sure teachers loved it, and it's a very sensitive topic, but thank you so much for coming and actually talking about it with all the teachers. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Very appreciated, guys. And yeah, then there's only left to say have a lovely evening. And
all right, you too. Have a nice evening. Bye, everyone. See you next week, Blackbelts.
Bye.
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 Masalam.